Dark Souls is many things. It's a game all about engrossing yourself in this well-developed world rich with lore that you can find yourself lost in for hours. It's a game with a musically diverse soundtrack with memorable and beautifully written melodies dominating just about every tune with a wide array of instruments and keys. It's a game with a robust, intricate combat system that consistently keeps you engaged with what's happening around you. Dark Souls is all these things and more, much, much more. But what frustrates me is that these magnificent games have been oversimplified and boiled down to its most basic, advertisable components to be synonymous with hard, which is already pretty subjective. Ever read about another game, even ones with virtually no similarities to it, being the Dark Souls of whatever? I bet you have, and it stems primarily from people in the games journalism industry who use this way of comparing games to Dark Souls with 100% seriousness. Not only is using Dark Souls to equate difficulty to something extremely lazy, it's also a worthless critique. Out of curiosity, what do you think the statement, "Pikmin is the Dark Souls of collectathons" means? See, the implication here, according to the genius critics of our day, is that Pikmin is difficult, thus being similar to Dark Souls. But what I actually meant was that it has some really good music like Dark Souls. You see, this means nothing because the phrase is not some common slang or something people use all the time. Like, "Hey Bill, you see the game last night? Yeah, it was totally the Dark Souls of sports." Okay, Bill, you stupid idiot. What if I told my doctor I just took the Dark Souls of shits? What do you think he would say? Would he give me some laxatives or some antipsychotic stuff? The other issue with this mindset is that the assumption of Dark Souls being the hardest game ever or even being difficult is not really that true. Yes, Dark Souls gives you a challenge, but is it hard? I don't think so. That's the thing with difficulty, it's entirely based on the person, not the game. I could say Garfield Kart is hard because it takes a great deal of effort to move my fingers to hold the A button to go. So does that mean every hard game is the Garfield Kart of its genre? Anything can be hard if you don't learn how to conquer the obstacle. How do you cook eggs? You gotta learn that shit. You have to conquer the art of not getting salmonella. See, with the Soulsborne series, I think a lot of the supposed challenge has largely to do with the marketing campaign and design. If you couldn't tell by the really subtle subtitle to the first Dark Souls Complete Edition, From Software really wants to hammer in that point for new players that this is not a baby game. It's a game for men! The best of the better with the fight! This intense difficulty is a marketing angle only exacerbated by gaming media outlets and others that make the stupid aforementioned comparisons. Here's the thing, Dark Souls' world is designed with a particular set of rules that each player is given adequate time to learn before enemies ramp up with higher damage output, tougher attack patterns to predict, and whatnot. The Undead Asylum is perfectly crafted so you, the player, learn all of From Software's game design tricks that you have to be prepared for later on. When you first emerge from the doorway after your encounter with the Archer Hollow, there's another hollow positioned at the top of the steps ready to roll a boulder down at you. If you can react quick enough, which you're given ample time to do, you can avoid the damage right off the bat and proceed on your way. However, if you don't pay attention and just run up the steps without a care in the world, you might end up dead. This is what Dark Souls is famous for, this misdirection where you can feel safe, but something might end up coming from seemingly nowhere to damage you. This is done in Bloodborne 2 and Central Yharnam, where huntsmen are positioned behind corners that you might carelessly pass by and end up feeling a sharp, bloody surprise. These happen at the beginning of the experiences, so you can be ready for similar surprises later on. Dark Souls is the type of game that isn't constantly challenging, rather it asks the player to be consistently paying attention to the world around them. It's like one of those lessons on Mavis Bacon, you know, those typing tools you were made to do when you were younger. These games weren't hard, but for me, as a kid, not knowing the rules of typing, it certainly was harder because I had to really pay attention to what I was doing. Never would Mavis Bacon suddenly go, "Okay, dipshit, tell me the 4 basic fundamentals of string theory in Japanese." It's contained to a certain set of rules, like Dark Souls. I don't think many people were ready to be demanded this consistent attention when Dark Souls first came onto the scene, leading to many deaths, frustration, and the hard as hell stigma it carries today. Games of the past didn't demand such attention of players, except in short bursts. Super Mario Sunshine! Easy game, right? Yeah, it's pretty much a cakewalk for much of your playthrough. But every now and then, it will throw these sections at you where you can't have your hover nozzle. Such is a change of pace since you rely so much on the hover nozzle for platforming and to correct yourself if you fail in that regard. These stages where Mario doesn't have his safety net are inherently harder because the player isn't used to platforming without it. This is why you probably got stuck in Pianta Village Episode 3 as a kid, because hell knows I did. Floodless episodes aren't very hard, sure, but it does serve as the place where many deaths might occur as opposed to the usual sunshine shenanigans of shooting water rockets from a roller coaster or collecting red coins in a controlled environment like in Bianco Hills. Of course, this isn't a knock to Sunshine. I fucking love that game, or any other game for that matter, because I think both design choices work well for what they attempt to do. Sunshine's elements of taking FLUDD away complement its level design, and Dark Souls is likewise complemented by it trying to keep the player consistently focused. The Soulsborne series doesn't have many of these moments where the rules of the game are suddenly changed.
Except for Lost Izalith and Bed of Chaos.
Instead, the game is divided primarily into boss fights and world exploration. However, since enemies pack just as much of a punch for the most part as boss fights, you still have to consistently pay attention. While bosses are admittedly a change of pace and significantly more challenging, they aren't something that changes the rules. They're more so super enemies that you have to learn to counter. Every boss fight can be beaten easily when you know what you're doing and learn the boss's moveset and abilities. But that doesn't mean these bosses are extremely hard though. Maybe you die a couple times and lose your blood echoes or souls, but each life after death offers a new take on the boss fight with previous knowledge you didn't have. Something that's quote-unquote hard indicates something that requires a great deal of effort, but once you get the hang of your surroundings, controls, and are able to predict attacks, that's when you become good at Dark Souls. There are challenges you have to face and you do die a lot, but that's not indicative of something that's extremely hard as the marketing or people seem to suggest. Plus, the over-reliance of pushing this narrative that Dark Souls is hard detracts from some of its best elements. Even if you disagree and say Dark Souls is hard, I think we can all agree that Dark Souls is more than just a hard game. Most people don't play Dark Souls to have it kick their ass. Most just fell in love with how well every Soulsborne installment presents itself. The worlds are rich and fascinating lore, whether that be what happened to Yharnam or why you even exist in the world in the first place. Who's Father Gaskugi and what's his story? What happened to Gwyn, the Lord of Cinder? Much like the Lovecraftian works some Soulsborne games take inspiration from, I know I was so engrossed in reading about the history of the world I must have gone crazy. Whether that be just reading in general, watching videos about the characters and lore, or just exploring the locations in game to see what could be found. Not to mention the music that ties everything together in game, where tracks can be ambient, solemn, or upbeat and fierce. There's a lot of cool instrumentation that happens in the music, even better when the tracks are filled with rising melodic choirs. Dark Souls is more than just a hard experience. If I wanted that, I'd try to get a girlfriend on MySpace. If you take anything away from this, I just want this horrendous, the Dark Souls of comparisons to stop. It's just stupid when you seriously oversimplify such a complex game like Dark Souls to be hard and nothing else but hard. Surely there are better ways to critique games rather than using comparisons in your reviews. Like, I don't know, talking about the game's design and mechanics? It's lazy writing. I know it's a meme and it seems super silly to be talking about it, but it's just so stupid when people seriously write this garbage in their reviews or articles. They're not joking around. They're serious. Can you believe it? If you're gonna talk about this series, give it some love and talk about the more in-depth elements that make it so beloved, rather than hammering in the Dark Souls is hard shtick again and again and again and again and again. No game is the Dark Souls of anything except for Dark Souls, especially not Crash Bandicoot. Especially not Crash Bandicoot GameStop. Oh no, I meant GameSpot. You would see my confusion when they're both shitty. Anyways, if you disagree or agree with me on this one, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching and take care. Have a wonderful day. Amen.